Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages as they come in. In the next half hour, then, we'll see what's making the headlines with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. Great to see you both. Hello.
Lovely to see you, Anna.
As ever then, front pages before we get your thoughts. The Guardian leading with the Prime Minister sending 2 Royal Navy ships to protect Jersey from a feared blockade by French fishing vessels in an escalation of a dispute over post-Brexit access to waters around the Channel Island. The Daily Mail pictures one of the vessels being deployed, HMS Seven. Boris sends in the Navy is also the big splash there for the Metro. Also the lead for the Daily Telegraph. Scotland's Daily Record speaks to First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who insists she'd be prepared to work with the Labour Party if the SNP can't secure an outright majority at Holyrood in tomorrow's elections. Financial Times has a story concerning the hedge fund, I don't know how to pronounce it, Archegos Capital, which is expected to declare insolvency. And The Star goes with Donald Trump setting up his own website to keep supporters updated on his opinions. Showing my lack of knowledge there, aren't I? But anyway, let's move on to what is almost a clean sweep of the newspapers on the Navy warships. If you wanted to get the front pages before an election, this is how to do it, Kevin, isn't it?
Yeah, God, really, really cynical, isn't it? I mean, look, it's May the 6th tomorrow, it's not April the 1st. But when France is threatening to cut undersea electricity cables, I'm not too sure what 2 warships on the surface would do. And, the Mail leads on it, the Guardian, the Telegraph. The Mail is salivating over the weapons on those boats, listing the cannon and the guns.
Right.
I can guarantee they will not be fired. Now, there are French fishing boats threatening to blockade the port. The truth is, if you get 40, 50 French fishing boats turning up, there's very little those 2 warships can do. This is just electioneering by Boris Johnson, who sold the fishing industry down the river in his bad Brexit deal. And now he wants to beat his chest, wrap himself in the flag and pose as a defender of the fishing industry against the French. It's all pretty pathetic.
Andrew.
Well, you're not surprising I don't agree with a word that Kevin Maguire says. I don't at the best of times, but he's excelled himself with the cant he's speaking tonight. Look, the French have behaved outrageously, sanctioned by a government minister, threatening to cut off electricity supplies to Jersey in a dispute over fishing access. Now, I don't know who's right and who's wrong, whether it's Jersey or France, but Jersey say before the French had to show evidence that these trawlers have fished in Jersey waters. These are small boats. The Jersey authorities say they've not provided it. France carrying on like they're still in the EU, bullying and throwing their weight around, think they can bully little Jersey. Good old Boris Johnson sending in the Royal Navy. I think people will be cheering this up and down the land. I think it is coincidence, of course, we've got elections tomorrow, but also we know that this little flotilla of French trawlers are on their way because I think tomorrow is the 200th anniversary of the death of Napoleon Bonaparte. And let's not forget, we saw him off too, so we can see him off again. I think it's a fantastic piece of gunboat diplomacy by Boris. Fantastic gunboat diplomacy. Labour Party, eat your heart out.
Oh,
Fantastic. Right on the eve of the elections too.
What? At the end of Bonaparte, and he managed to work that in.
It's all there. It's all the history. You look at the history.
It's 200-year-old history, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, the nation of shopkeepers fights back against little Boney and his marauding army on the continent.
We saw him off then. We'll see him off again. We saw off the Armada, Kevin, don't forget too.
Yeah, you'll have the Prussians and now the Germans coming to the aid of Wellington any moment, won't you? Although you like to...
Standing up for British interests. That's our Prime Minister.
This is utterly ludicrous. Utterly ludicrous. It's quite easy to condemn the French government's threats, and they deserve to be condemned. But it needs somebody to say, let's all calm down and be a bit sensible. Let's not be sending warships, which of course Johnson does. And Andrew, Tory boy there, said, well, it's no coincidence on the eve of the election. We know what it is. It's just a cynical political ploy by a charlatan in Downing Street. That's what it is. We're going to help solve this issue. It has to be resolved.
A charlatan in Downing Street who, according to the polls, is going to get a lot more votes than the charlatan running the Labour Party at the moment, Sakir who. And you know, Jersey's a very small island and it needs someone to stand up for it. And Boris is doing just that.
Okay,
He's being a good Prime Minister.
It makes
and
the front of the...
he took this decision, Anna, he took this decision after talking to the First Minister of Jersey. So Jersey wanted the help.
Has he got donors living in Jersey, you know, for the tax advantages before they slip him money for wallpaper and other perks he likes for himself?
Good try, Maguire. Good try, Kevin.
It's certainly united the newspapers, though, hasn't it? Making the front of the Mail and the Guardian, and as I said, most of the other newspapers. Daily Mail front page, if we just go back to that as we head towards our election coverage, Boris sends gunboats into Jersey, and then down the bottom, if we lose that strap, Tories election day jabs booster. So you're laying it on thick for anybody who's thinking of voting Tory, aren't you? But let's go to the election then. Last push for many of the newspapers. This is fascinating, isn't it? Kevin, to you first of all, who's quaking in their boots over this enormous electoral test? Sir Keir Starmer, the pressure is on, surely.
Yeah, no, I think it is. The Conservative Party have got a big poll lead from a vaccine bounce. They were beginning to fall behind in some polls before Christmas. Starmer was rating better than Johnson. The NHS mass vaccination programme's been a huge success, and the government will get some credit for that, just as it deserves much blame for the 127,000 deaths and economic damage, which were both inflicted much heavier than would have needed to be. So no, it's Keir Starmer. The pressure is on in the Hartlepool by-election. What happens in the West Midlands and Tees Valley mayoral battles? Both Conservative needs to be winning those back. What happens in some of those north of England Labour seats, the Red Wall seats? Does he make gains, or will Labour be losing councillors and councils? In Wales, Mark Drakeford, the First Minister, Labour there, is widely praised for his handling of the pandemic. But what happens to Labour? Can it stay in power? And if it stays in power, which is its majority, then you go to Scotland, which is probably it's certainly constitutionally the most important election of all. Does the SNP get a majority? And then can Labour pip the Conservatives to second place? That's what these elections are essentially about.
Yeah. Andrew, your take on this? Clearly, Boris Johnson has made a few visits to Hartlepool, which is the by-election, which is the first result we're going to get. Quite a drawn-out results process, certainly, as we head into the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to wait a long time. I don't think we're going to get the London result, which we all know is it's Sadiq Khan wins by a mile anyway, till Sunday. But Kevin says that Boris Johnson's had a vaccine bounce. Yes, of course he has. He's also benefited from the fact that the Labour campaign is utterly vacuous. They've had very little to say. We just heard Keir Starmer muttering the same old mantra, Tory sleaze, Tory sleaze. I think he needs to remember that most voters under the age of 50 don't remember a single thing about John Major's government and how it was beset with sleaze. I think he's been banging up the wrong tree the whole way through this election campaign. He should have found something positive to talk about. Instead, he's just churned out the same old thing. And I think it hasn't cut through very well for him. This is a huge disaster for him if he loses Hartlepool, because even Jeremy Corbyn, who led Labour to their worst election defeat since 1935, managed to hold on to Hartlepool not once but twice, and he won 9 out of 10 by-elections. This will only be the third or fourth time a government has won a seat from an opposition party in a by-election, if indeed the Tories win Hartlepool, which would be a measure of Keir Starmer's failure.
I mean, this is fascinating. Let's go to the Daily Record, showing that only because it's talking about the SNP working with Labour. Certainly north of the border, Labour have had a torrid decade, haven't they? You start losing Scotland, you start losing your heartlands in the north of England. Does this begin to be existential for the Labour Party? You can't blame Corbyn anymore because he's not there. So what does Labour do about it if they ever want to win a general election after these local elections, obviously?
Yeah, Anna, nationally, across Great Britain, the Labour vote's been in decline since 1997, and the high point, that huge Tony Blair majority. It's a very low turnout in 2001, then in 2005 lost about half the seats. Then you go back, actually the Labour vote in 2010 and in 2015 were lower as a proportion of the electorate than in 2019 under Corbyn, when got the worst Westminster result in terms of seats since 1935. So no, Labour's in long-term decline, and somehow has to arrest it. One way you can say Starmer was never going to change that very quickly, and what's happened with the pandemic, initially because of all the mistakes on care homes, PPE, number of people dying, dithering on lockdown, he managed to be the serious man, serious times, and work that to his advantage, and people were turning against Johnson. But then the vaccines come along, and it seems to have inoculated Labour against success. And I mean, he's right in one way, Andrew, about Hartlepool. It would be only the fourth time since the Second World War that a governing party's taken a seat from the opposition. There has been a Tory MP in that seat before. The Hartlepools it was 1959 64. But Labour should be increasing its majority in a seat like that. And I know the pandemic has changed politics, but you should be making progress if you're the Labour leader. It's not the end. He's not going to be. There'll be calls from the left for him to go. And in fact, the seat was only held in 2019 because the Brexit Party got 10,500 votes. If they hadn't got those votes, Labour would have lost it then. And those who say, well, look, Corbyn held Hartlepool. No, you should. Well, Corbyn also saw Boris Johnson in Downing Street. They don't accept responsibility for that, so I'm not sure you can just say it's as simple as Corbyn held it in 2017, 2019, Starmer loses it in 2021. If he does, then that means he's so much worse and it's finished. It's a work in progress, they would say, but he's got a big mountain to climb, as Labour in general has a big mountain to climb.
And can I just say one other thing on Hartlepool? I don't know what idiot decided that the Labour candidate in Hartlepool should be not just a Remainer, but a fanatical pro-EU supporter when Hartlepool voted by 70% to leave the European Union. And he was kicked out by the voters of Stockton South, this guy, 2 years ago, for the same reason, in my view. He was a fanatical Remainer in a Leave constituency. So what possessed them to put that guy in that seat? It's been a terrible, terrible error of judgment, and one for which I think Keir Starmer must take quite a lot of responsibility.
Well, we find out, but he is a local GP who's been on the COVID front line for a year. So I don't think you should be just so dismissive of him as a person. He has been busy saving lives and deserves some credit for that.
Yeah, well, lots and lots of coverage for all of us, I think, over the coming days. It's fascinating contests. Didn't even get to talk about Scotland properly. Perhaps we'll do that in the next time we see you. But back for more in just a moment. We'll see you after the break. And coming up, the G7 meetings in London disrupted by positive COVID tests. Talk about that in just a moment.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
They can't go back to Myanmar yet. If they do, they fear they'll be killed.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. If there is a bigger explosion, this area would be in the danger zone.
These traffic jams snake for hours up and down this hillside. It means precious aid can't access those in need. You can see the depth of the water. If you have a look in front of us, there are people wading through it. I think experiencing the 2 million person march in Hong Kong, that was a moment.
I don't like the Chinese government. It's cruel.
It was real people power in action.
Police have been firing tear gas and rubber bullets.
See fires all around us here, and just one of them is the size of around 31,000 football pitches. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Bangkok.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire. Welcome back to both of you. Andrew, let's go to the metro, shall we? Everyone's been watching in absolute horror what's been happening in India. But you bring a delegation over here and look what happens.
Yeah, and we could have worked it out, couldn't we? India's got the worst COVID infection rate anywhere in the world, and it's probably much worse, actually, than the figures are showing. So 2 members of the delegation have been confirmed as having COVID. It means the Home Secretary, half the British delegation are now being checked. We'll probably have to go into isolation. Question is, why did we feel the need to bring them in? Why couldn't we have talked to the Indian delegation on Zoom? Partly because we just struck a mini trade deal with India, so I suppose we wanted to put some bunting on that deal. But my question is, why are we allowing any flights in from India at all? I'd have banned them. Just for a few weeks. About 10 or 11 countries have already done so, including Saudi Arabia and New Zealand. I think it's madness.
Yeah, I think most people thought they had been banned, given it's on the red list. But it doesn't work like that, does it? It just means you have to go into hotel quarantine. But there we are.
There are exemptions, Anna, for diplomats, but there is now a big question: what do you do about the G7, the world leaders, Biden, Macron, Merkel, all of those coming to due to come to the UK? They go to Carbis Bay in Cornwall next month. Are you still going to have such movement? Will they actually want to come when it could be spreading the virus? And
the WHO making quite clear today that the priority must be to get nations like India vaccinated. Instead, here we're talking about a 3rd booster vaccine for some adults in the population of the UK. With all this money now being thrown at variants of concern as well to work out what the vaccine no doubt should be. What's the latest from The Guardian, Kevin?
It's a small trial that's shown that you tweak the vaccines, and they're very successful against the South African and Brazilian variants, for example. And it's why when you get the booster, it won't be the same as your first 2 jabs, but it will protect you further. And it is in the UK, a lot of the world, look, in the USA, Biden's first 100 days, there was 1 million jabs given. So Western wealthy economies, once they get going, can be really successful at this, but because we begin to protect ourselves, but we're never going to be protected as long as countries like India are struggling to get enough vaccine into arms. And so there's not just a moral case for helping them, there's also a self-interest in it.
You've got 10 seconds on Michel Barnier's diaries, Andrew.
Yeah, he's the old bore from the EU, was their chief negotiator on Brexit. And he's described Boris Johnson. He thought Boris Johnson had a madman's strategy in the Brexit talks, which he thought caused turmoil. Well, madman's strategy it may have been, but it worked because he got a Brexit deal against all the odds. And if Theresa May was still Prime Minister, we'd still be waiting.
Yeah, he sold the fishing industry down the river. He's got a border down the You've got huge jams. People complain.
Yeah. It's marvellous. Brexit's going very well, Kevin. Thank you. Brexit's going very, very well. Very happy with it.
We haven't got time to open that again. We'll see at 11:30. Thank you.